Today I want to talk to you about another question in this series of better decisions and fewer regrets. There's questions that we ask ourselves, and this session I want to talk to you about the maturity question. It's kind of like legal versus illegal, responsible versus irresponsible, moral versus immorality or immoral, ethics versus unethical. It's the line between I'm still in control and I need help. It's the human nature to snuggle up to the edge of irresponsibility, disaster, and embarrassment and stay there as long as possible. It's human nature to get by with as much as we can without becoming our own worst enemy. It's a flawed assumption that fuels this insistent flirtation with disaster and informs so many of our decisions, what we think, what we do. And it's an assumption that impedes our ability to make good decisions. Again, the series is to make great decisions and mitigate, minimize, eradicate the regrets. For the sake of clarity, let me just illustrate a couple of things that will give you contrasting ideas about assumption. If it's not wrong, then it's right. If it's not legal, then it's permissible. If it's not immoral, then it's acceptable. If it's not over the line, then it's fine. Essentially, we're asking ourselves in our head, how far can we go? How close to bad can I get without being bad? How close to wrong can I get without doing wrong? How close to sin without actually sinning? That's a great question. Before long, we're asking, how far over the line can I go without being caught? We begin to live a sneaky life. We begin to live in the shadows. It's all about asking the wrong question. Is there anything wrong with this? Nope, wrong question. Bad question. You see, there's a better question that needs to be asked because it will ensure a better decision. It's a question that, if I answer honestly and I act on it, it will ensure that I will avoid regrets. I will avoid disaster and hurt. The question is the fourth of our 5 questions that we're exploring in this series. And as I mentioned at the outset, this time it's the maturity question. I call it the maturity question because I'm asking this question and it requires the advice and evidence of maturity. Refusing to ask this question is, I'm going to say, immature. It's the opposite. But let me just kind of back up to our memorization verse. It's Proverbs 27:12, which is our common thread, our theme throughout this whole series. And it reads, and it says, the prudent see danger and take refuge. The simple, I'm going to add the immature on this lesson, keep going. The immature do whatever they want. They think about consequences. They think about bad decisions. They think about disaster later. But the maturity question is this. Here's the big thing. This is the lesson. Catch this. What is the wise thing to do? Maybe there's no chapter, there's no verse, there's no pastoral counsel. Someone's not available. There's no lifeline. There's no call a friend. Ask yourself, what is the wise thing to do? When making a decision of any consequences, you got to pause and ask, what is the wise thing for me to do? The option you're considering may be legal. It may be acceptable. Honestly, it might even be permissible and not exactly immoral. But you got to come back and ask yourself, but is it wise? Your greatest regret was preceded by a series of unwise decisions. You see, the decisions probably weren't wrong. Probably they weren't illegal. Looking back, they were terribly unwise. Maybe it didn't even violate biblical principle or scripture. But you've got to ask yourself, is it wise? The series of unwise decisions always pave the way to regrets. Again, I'm trying to help us mitigate, minimize, eradicate the regrets. And so if you're serious You're going to start asking yourself this question: what is the wise thing to do? You see, the Apostle Paul spells it out for us in his letter to Christians living in Ephesus. This is what is called the Pauline epistles. These letters are written after the book of Acts to Christians in the city that they live. And this is Ephesians, so he's writing to the Christians in Ephesus. And he says this in chapter 5, verses 15 and 16. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Here's how you would frame the question to yourself. In light of my past experience, my current circumstances, and my future and hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing for me to do? You see, we're all different. We come from different walks of life, different upbringings. Some of us were raised in church our whole lives. Some come to church in their teens and 20s, later in life. So you've got to kind of go through the grid of, in light of my past, maybe the way I was raised, maybe the way I was addicted to something, maybe what God delivered me from. In light of my current situation, I got kids, I'm married. And then in light of my future, where I want to go. So when you ask this question, you got to ask yourself in this light. In light of the current circumstances and the state of mind, where I've been, what I've worked through, the scars I live with, where I want to go, what is the wise thing for me to do? Remember, our greatest regrets are always preceded by a series of unwise decisions. So if I can ask myself the right questions, I can begin to make good and wholesome decisions. In light of your future hopes, okay, this is what you're asking yourself. In light of your future dreams, what is the wise thing for me to do? You see, it's going to vary. The wise thing for you and the wise thing for me, the wise thing for your spouse might be a little different because of our background, maybe some scars that we live with, or maybe we don't have scars, and there's some areas in our life that we might view a little different. So you got to personalize it. In light of where I want to be financially, 5 to 10 years from now, what is the wise thing to do? Where do you want to be? And then you decide. You see, that's why we call it the maturity question, because it takes maturity. When you're young, you said, hey, I'm invincible, we'll figure it out later. When you're young, you don't think about paying taxes, you don't think about Social Security, you don't think about health care, because you're at a different station in life. But this lesson is scalable to everybody. You could be your late teens, early 20s. You could be your mid-80s. But where do you want to be? Then you decide. You see, that's a hard question to answer honestly. It takes us back to our first question. Are you being honest with yourself? And remember, we added the word really. Am I being honest? Am I looking in the mirror and asking myself a question? And then when I answer, is that really the truth? So I say, ask it. What is the wise thing for me to do? You owe it to yourself to know. You owe it to your family. You owe it to people that depend on you. You owe it to your spouse if you're married. In light of your past experience, in light of the current circumstances, what am I in right now? And where do I see myself? It's called my future, my hopes, my dreams. What is the wise thing for me to do? How am I going to get out of this? If I make this decision now, it's going to impact the future. So where I want to be in the future, does it support it or does it derail it? Again, this is a mature question. See, my grandkids probably can't ask this question because they're not mature. And life in the future doesn't really matter to them, and they don't really have a past. But mature people, I'm speaking to mature people tonight, today, in this lesson. What is the wise thing to do? So of all of what I said today, of the takeaway, maybe you type it in your notes. Maybe you memorize it. Put it somewhere. Whenever you're up against a decision, you pause, you think, you ponder about this session. And you've got to ask I ask myself this question. When I'm counseling with people, when I'm making decisions for the church, when I'm making decisions for my family, when I'm giving advice to my kids, I'm asking myself, what's the wise thing to do? And then I think for the most part, with the help of God and the maturity that we live, we probably can find out. And if we're not sure, then I say get godly spiritual counsel. And then together, yes, there's safety in the multitude of counsel. So you, if you're married, your spouse, your friend, your parent, a pastoral staff, Pastor Mark, Sister Ashley, if you have kids, Pastor Nolan, maybe you're doing something and your kids are wanting to do something. They're asking questions. Hey, Pastor Nolan, Sister Katie, what's the wise thing to do? Here's my middle school kid. Or here's a decision that they forced me to make on the job. Does it violate your convictions? Well, what's the wise thing to do? Anyway, I think you kind of get the idea. Hey, I appreciate you being here. We'll pick up right there next week when we explore the fifth and final question. And next week, we're going to talk about the relationship question. It's really good. I think you're going to like it. Hey, have a great week. I look forward to seeing you this coming Sunday.